Hello, welcome to Book Up Session. I'm Ashley Gunn. Today's book review is going to be on Liane Moriarty's A Husband's Secret. With this book, I feel like I need to talk about some of the specifics, which will be spoilers. So what I'm going to do is go through the book like I normally do, just tell you in general what it's about, some of the things I like, if there are things I don't like, and then at the very end, I'll let you guys know when there's going to be spoilers, and then I'm going to talk about some specifics that will give away parts of the book. But I will warn you guys in advance. But we'll begin with just a review. In general, what you need to know about this book is it's going to be about 3 different lives that intertwine in different ways. I gotta tell you at the beginning, this felt a little chaotic to me because I was looking for the pieces of how these lives fit together and I couldn't find them, and that is because you really won't know for a couple of chapters. When I go through the explanation of each of the families, which I'm going to do in just a minute, I will tell you guys when you'll see the connection, because I personally felt like once I connected them, it moved a lot easier for me. It was so much smoother. The book is going to begin with Cecilia and her family, and Cecilia lives an incredible life. Her and her husband are very well off. They have 3 children, and she's married. She's very happy with everything. There is some questions about her and her husband's sex life, but not anything like out of the ordinary. And it's not anything that's making her really uncomfortable. It's just something that maybe she's thinking about, and that will be explained later in the book. One day when Jean-Claude's out of town, Cecilia's helping her daughter because her daughter's kind of had this obsession with the Berlin Wall, and she goes up in the attic to find this piece of the Berlin Wall that she actually owns to give to her daughter. And when she does, she finds this letter from her husband, and it says to be opened on the day of his death. And so, you're curious. She mentions it to her husband on their nightly phone call. She hadn't opened it or read it or anything. And his reaction kind of gave her a moment of pause. And then she knows he's lying by his reaction over the phone. So she kind of hides it away. Suddenly he comes home 3 days early. They go to sleep. She wakes up in the middle of the night to sounds, and he's rustling around in the attic. Clearly he's hiding something. She opens the letter and her life explodes. From there, you're going to go on to Tess and Will's story. And again, this woman is happy with her life, happy in her marriage. She's taking care of her 6-year-old son, Liam, goes downstairs where her husband and her cousin, Felicity, are. Felicity and Tess have grown up their entire lives together. Like I said, they're cousins. Their mothers are twin sisters, and they are 6 months apart and literally have been best friends their entire lives. Their mothers actually say they're closer than twins. Anyways, Will tells Tess that he's in love with Felicity and that they've decided that they're in love and want to have a relationship. Tess almost basically loses it and decides she's going to take Liam, go home to Sydney to be with her mother, and that way Will and Felicity might be able to work it out, because Tess is convinced that once it's not a secret, once they're not sneaking around, that it's just lust and it's going to go away. And so Tess is absolutely against the idea of breaking up her marriage, getting a divorce, and her son having to go through that. I mean, obviously you don't always have control over that, but for her, she really just feels like if she takes her son away from the situation, that it'll resolve itself, that there's not anything that's going to ruin her life. As a matter of fact, one day she's talking to her cousin, yelling at her cousin, and says to her she's not going to break up her marriage, that she will never have her husband. And so it's clear that Tess from the beginning is planning on staying married to Will and planning on Felicity fading out. I mean, it's an incredible, what do you do? That's your blood. So that's their story. When that happens, that is when all of these stories converge, because until this point, I guess I didn't realize, Cecilia lives in Sydney, Tess is going to Sydney, and Rachel, which is the third person we'll talk about in just a second, she also goes to Sydney. So Rachel works at the school where Cecilia's kids are going and where Liam is going to be enrolled, and they also all go to the same church. When that happened, this book got so much easier. It just became a lot smoother when I was reading it, because I finally understood why we were hearing about all 3 of these stories. Rachel's story is that she has 2 children. She's not married, not in a relationship, and her son is grown, married, and has her first grandson. Her daughter, however, was murdered, I believe, 16 years ago in the book. And so this is about her trying to solve the murder. She hasn't given up hope, and she feels like the police have, and so she takes things into her own hands. That is really all you really need to know about the book. Personally, I liked the book once everything got smooth and clicked together. I just am a really organized person, and so that part of it bothered me in the very beginning. And then truthfully, I feel like maybe we could have done without like half of the mentions of the Berlin Wall. That's just because I didn't feel like they were really necessary. Everyone's going to have their own preference. These are not going to be happily ever after. Everybody runs off into the sunset stories. essentially karma is going to get people in the end of this, and then there'll be an epilogue where Liane just rubs salt in the wounds. If you like people having the realistic outcomes of their actions, because this is definitely a your actions have consequences book, you're going to like this book. I'm really interested in reading her other book, Big Little Lies, and so I'll probably do a review of that when I actually read it. Before I go into the spoilers, I just want to remind everybody that if you like this review, go ahead and like it. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put that down below. If you want, subscribe and you'll get my reviews every Tuesdays and Thursdays. From here, we're going to talk about some spoilers. A couple of things happened that I felt changed the way I thought of the book, and the first of those is that Tess is going to end up pregnant by a man named Connor. During the time that her and Will are separated, she sleeps with Connor and ends up pregnant and does not tell Will. And that felt icky to me. Truthfully, I just felt like she should have told her husband that she had this relationship. I believe that situation was a result of Will and Felicity's actions, and that it never would have happened if they didn't choose to behave that way. It just doesn't make it right. It doesn't make him not knowing that she slept with another man, or that she's lying to him, or the fact that that baby may not be his, acceptable. To me, she needs to take responsibility for her behavior the same as he had to take responsibility for his. And I just don't know that I could think of her the same way without her realizing hiding stuff is not the answer. The other thing that happens is Polly, Jean Paul's daughter, ends up losing her arm, and Rachel decides that she's not going to go to the police with the fact that Jean Paul murdered Janie and everything. But I felt like in a weird way, Polly losing her arm was paying for the fact that her father murdered Janie, and I don't know. That wasn't something I found acceptable. That may not be the way that Liane meant it to be interpreted. That's what it felt like to me, because when Polly's in the hospital, just lost her arm, Cecilia tells Rachel about the fact that Jean Paul was the one that murdered Janie. Jean Paul goes in and asks if she can wait to tell the police until Polly is out of the hospital because she needs him right now, and Rachel decides not to tell the police. I interpreted that as Rachel felt like her hitting Polly losing her arm and everything like that, Jean Paul needed to be with his daughters. She felt guilty for what she did to that little girl, and somehow everything was acceptable. It didn't work for me, because Jean Paul, yes, his daughter paid for it, but he didn't. And I'm not saying he should have gone to prison or jail. Rachel could have made the decision that he needed to be with his family and he knew what he did was wrong. But I don't think that Polly needed to be hurt in order for that to all happen. And then the last thing that, I don't know why it irked me the way it did, you have Connor, the possible daddy of Tess's baby, which is another reason this is an issue, is because Connor, if he was the father, had the right to know. And he just ends up with nothing for the most part. Him and Tess had an affair. He walks off into the sunset, and nothing comes of that. If that was the plan, then why have it be someone that it felt like Tess and Connor could have had a good relationship? Because it feels like there's a whole bunch of unanswered questions. There should be another story there. There should be whether Connor finds somebody else to move on with that's better than Tess. But at the end of that relationship, it felt like it still could have been a good relationship. There was no reason for there not to be a relationship. So that was all unanswered to me. Even with the issues and complaints I had about the book, the story itself was so beyond unpredictable that I really enjoy not knowing what's coming next and having to read. There were several times in this story that she had me on the edge of my seat and I wanted to flip ahead to really figure out what the next thing was going to go on. It's just the endings matter so much to me because I want happily ever afters. Obviously, I don't have the right to expect that Liane's going to write books with the endings that make me happy and everything mushy and cloudy and perfect. That being said, if you are the type of reader like I am, where you want that ending, where you want everybody to have some kind of closure, I just didn't feel like the ending was my style. And so I wanted to give a brief warning if you are like I am. So I will be reading Big Little Lies, and I'll do a review of that. I'm hoping it has a happy ending. We'll see. Anyways, thank you all for joining me. If you like this review, go and like it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, leave that down below. If you want my reviews every Tuesdays and Thursdays, subscribe. I will talk to you all again soon.